Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of this academic year's Boost Your Skills webinar series, where we enlist the advice of specialist experts in order to help you make the most out of your university experience and to acquire the skills to help you succeed and develop both professionally and on a personal level. I'm Start, and joining me is Jenny, and we are your Boost Your Skills team. And today we have a very special guest speaker in Grace Marshall, better known as the Productivity Ninja. So we are extremely pleased to have Grace here. She is an award-winning author and will be referring to her books as she shares insights into how to get your best human work done. This event is in webinar format, so you will not be able to turn on your cameras and mics, but we would still love to hear from you through the chat function. This is a safe space with no judgments being passed, so please feel free to ask questions without fear or worry. And if you're still anxious, feel free to message Jenny or myself anonymously and we will pass it on. This webinar will consist of a short focus exercise, a 45-minute session, followed by a Q&A session. Please send any questions into the chat box and we'll attempt to go through all of them. The event is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. So don't worry if you've missed something. We will be sharing a link to the video and all the slides after the event. Finally, thank you to all our attendees who pre-submitted questions. So without further delay, here's Grace.
Thank you so much, Sid. So yeah, we're going to start with a bit of a focus exercise first, bit of a game. Normally I do this face to face and I can actually see what you're doing, but I'm just going to trust that you're going to join in. So if you would like to grab something to write with and something to write on, so just a scrap of paper, notebook if you're already making notes. I'm going to demonstrate first and then I'm going to give you the opportunity to do this. So in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a word. And all I want you to do is write the word and then number the letters. So for example, if the word was focus, then all you do is write F-O-C-U-S and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's it. So it's not code, it's not complicated. You just write the word and then number the letters. So if it was a 6-letter word, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 underneath. Okay, hopefully that's all really clear. Sid or Jenny, I'm going to ask one of you to time for us. Who's going to be our timer?
We can both time and then
okay, you can both time.
Very
yeah,
accurate.
Okay. Right. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to give you the word and I want you to write the word, write the numbers. So those of you who are watching, write the word, write the numbers, and then let us know when you're done. So you can do that by either putting your hand up, there's a hand button on Zoom, or you can type done into the chat if you want to. It might take you an extra couple of seconds, but however you want to do it, let us know when you're done. And what Sid and Jenny are going to do is to time and see how quickly you can do that, and also see who's the quickest. Okay. So if we're ready, hopefully we are. The word is multitasking. So write the word, write the numbers, let us know when you're done.
Someone's just mentioned that the chat is disabled, so put your hand up and we'll look into the oh wow, some people raising their hands already. Okay. Ooh. That was only like 13 seconds, I think, the first person, even less. So Zoom.
Yeah, I got 13 on mine as well, 13 and a half.
Nice. Did you manage to spot who was the quickest to raise their hand?
No, let's see if we can see who did it first. I don't know whether we...
It doesn't tell you, does it?
No. Oh, we should have been more vigilant. Next,
okay.
On
Round
the next
two,
one,
then.
we'll keep an eye out.
I'll give you another opportunity then. Round two.
Okay, so everyone's got to now put their hands back down again.
Yep. So this time, when I give you the word, instead of writing all the letters, then all the numbers, what I'd like you to do is write the first letter, then the number, letter, number, letter, number. So what you end up with is still the same, but you're doing letter, number, letter, number, letter, number. Okay. So again, the idea is to do it as quickly as possible. So when you're done, pop your hand up. And again, Sid and Jenny will see if we can spot who's the quickest and how long it takes. Okay. So the word this time is multitasking. And yes, you do have to write it again. I don't believe you, Abel. I think a couple of you probably went, oh, I've already done it, so I can put my hand up. There we go. I think Johnny's hand just went up. We're going to go with Johnny. Okay.
It looks
How
like
long was
most
that?
people done that.
Yeah. How long did that take?
It was a bit longer, about 15 seconds.
Okay. Yeah.
I got
bad.
that 14, 28, 15, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit longer. I wonder, how did that feel? So if we don't have chat enabled, oh no, we do have chat enabled.
I just enabled chat now, so it should be
Perfect.
okay.
Okay, so head on over to the chat and just describe to me, give me a couple of words to describe, how did that feel?
Harder, tough, fun. Frustrating, intense, yeah. I get all of that.
Yeah, even though I didn't hear the task instructions, the multitasking was difficult. Yeah, definitely more demanding, had to switch. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing when we're multitasking, is we are rapidly refocusing, we're switching tasks. And when we do that, we make ourselves on average 30% slower and twice as likely to make mistakes. So we make the work harder, it takes longer, it's more stressful, and we're far more likely to make a mistake as well. So I don't know if anyone's ever sent the email to the wrong person, or like type the thing that they're listening to. Like, you might even be multitasking right now. You might be joining this session going, oh, I'll just listen in while I do some work over here. Hopefully that exercise has maybe convinced you to stop and choose one thing or the other, either join in or go do whatever you need to do and then come back later and watch the recording. So when we, rather than multitasking, because multitasking doesn't work for your productivity, but it's also bad for your sanity as well, because as a few of you said, like, that felt a lot harder, it felt tougher, and it becomes more stressful as well. So just a little bit of an exercise to get us started and to get us thinking about how we do our best work, and maybe how sometimes we don't necessarily create the environment for ourselves to do our best work. So as Sid said, my name is Grace Marshall and I am a productivity ninja. I'm actually part of a team of ninjas. There are several of us, a growing number of ninjas across the world. So the productivity ninja title comes from the work that I do with Think Productive, which is a global productivity consultancy. We started off in the UK and we now have offices over in North America, in Australia. I believe we're starting one up in Dubai as well. So and Western Europe as well. We've got some European ninjas. So what we do is we work with all sorts of different organizations. I've worked with sort of from students to CEOs, from artists to engineers, from startup founders to corporate managers, helping them to find their best ways of working. So helping them to find ways of working with less stress, less overwhelm, and more what we like to call playful, productive momentum. So what we're really interested in isn't how do we get people to do more work, but actually how do we all do our best work, have fun doing it, and have a life outside of work. So that sounds good to you. That is what we're all about. As well as my ninja work, I also coach. So I work with people one-to-one, and I also write books. So I know that 2 of them are on sale as part of this event today. So what I've always been really interested in is how do we do our best work? And I know that I was very clear in the title to say, let's just forget time management. And I think I probably should just be upfront and say, I'm naturally disorganized. So I would not have picked time management or as my thing, because that's not what I'm naturally gravitated towards. However, it picked me. So when I started my coaching business, 14 years ago now, it's kind of like my middle child, because my kids are 17 and 13. So my business is my middle child. Too much to do, not enough time, how do we fit it all in, was the number one question. And that's how a lot of our conversations around productivity start. It's like, there is too much going on, I can't fit it all in. How do I find more time? How do I make the most of my time? And so that's the reason why we tend to go for time management. The problem is, it's no longer just about time. So there's a quote that I really like from Minouche Shafiq, who was the Deputy Director of the Bank of England. And she's currently the director of LSE, so London School of Economics. And she says that in the past, jobs were about muscles. In the present, they're about the brain. In the future, they'll be about the heart. And so if you think about it, the kind of work we used to do with our muscles is basically the realm of time management. Henry Ford was the person who coined the 40-hour week. He was the one who came up with the idea of the 40-hour week. His time was very much about time management. It was about getting people to the right place at the right time so they can do their bit of the assembly work. But the kind of work that we do these days isn't so much about physically being in a place. Some of it is still, like we still need to show up, but it's not just about physically being there at the right time. It's also about how we show up with our mind, but also how we show up with our hearts. So our capacity to do our best work as a human being is physical, mental, and emotional. So if we start thinking about our physical capacity, that's the realm of time management. That's like, can I physically fit in, that meeting, or can I physically make it to that party? Or can I physically get from this lecture to that one? That's an easy choice to make. But the problem is, I don't know if you've ever had one of those days when you've been physically at your desk and you've got a lot of work to do, but you get to the end of the day and you think, none of it got done. Chances are it's not your physical capacity that's the problem, it's your mental capacity. So today, jobs are about the brain. And so when it's about the brain, it's our attention that matters more than our time, because time without attention is completely useless. And unlike time, our attention isn't constant. So you might have 8 hours of clear working time in your day, but not every hour is equal. You have times when you might be at your best, and when you kind of like really on it, you can solve problems really easily, you make decisions really easily, you're super creative, come up with the best ideas. That's your peak attention time. But on the other end, we have what I call our zombie moments. You've got time when you're like physically there, but your brain is toast. It's like, I can't think, I'm staring at a screen, I'm not able to make any decisions, everything takes longer. And so that's what I call your zombie moments. And one of the things that it's useful to think of is like, okay, rather than trying to level it all out, what would it look like to ride the attention wave? In fact, when are my peaks? When are my troughs? When am I at my best? When are my zombie moments? I wonder actually if we could maybe just reflect on that just slightly. I'd love to know if people can like maybe come in on the chat. When are your peak moments and when's your zombie time?
While we're waiting, I don't mind saying for myself, I tend to work quite well in the morning. So I like to, now that I'm working as well, I like to go to gym in the morning, and then you suddenly a bit awake, and I don't know, it's a mental thing of suddenly by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, you've already done something, you've actually achieved something with your day already. And then a couple of hours after that as well, you've got, I don't know, you feel physically quite well and mentally as well quite buzzing. And then as it gets on lunchtime, and I think maybe it's also when you put some food into your system, you get a bit tired, you get a bit lethargic. And then I don't know, and you get a little caffeine boosted. And then again, maybe in the afternoon around 2 or 3, you get that second wind. But that's kind of how mine goes. And I'm starting to figure out how to maximize my work when I have the actual time and the mental state.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you're in your zombie moment and you're trying to do that thing that you need like really good sort of thinking space to do, there's nothing you can do about it. You just stare at the screen and you get frustrated with yourself. But equally, if you're in your peak like attention zone and you're just kind of getting on with the really easy stuff, that's kind of like a criminal waste of your best attention. You're using like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's that kind of thing. So recognizing when's my peak time, when's my zombie time, and if you're not sure, then maybe just start to notice throughout the day, like when does it tend to be at my best? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to kind of know it down to the minute, because it's probably different as you go through the day. And like I said, if you've had like a broken night's sleep, then actually you might not be great in the morning. But when you can notice when you're at your best and when you're not, that's when you can then start to decide, okay, what's the most appropriate thing to do with this level of attention? So if you know that there are some peak tasks that need you to be at your best, there's no point doing it when you're in zombie mode. But equally, when you hit zombie mode, if you know you've got a little list of like, here are my zombie tasks, It's like, oh, do you know what? I've just, that post-lunch thing has just kicked in. I'm feeling a bit tired. I can go sort those receipts, or like do that bit of downloading, or whatever it is. So, being able to kind of actually mix and match what we do to our energy levels and our attention levels is a really good way of riding the attention wave. The other thing that comes into play when it comes to our attention is basically distractions, like what steals your attention. So there have been several studies on this. There was one back in 2004 by Microsoft, and they basically had a bunch of people working on something that required a certain level of mental investment. So they were writing reports, designing software, fixing bugs in the code, and they interrupted them with 1 minute interruptions. So imagine somebody coming up saying, hey, have you got a minute? Or a 1 minute text message, email, phone call. Any ideas how long it took them to get back to the thing they were doing before? What do you reckon?
We've got someone saying 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. I was going to say 30 minutes, so I'm sort of a bit on the higher end. Maybe that's just me. I take a long time.
I was going to say about 20 minutes as well. It's the same for me.
Yeah, so in this particular study, the average was 15. So some people took less, some people took longer. Maybe some people didn't even get back to the thing they were doing. In a study about 10 years later, 2014, there was a similar study, and they reckon the average recovery time there was 23 minutes and 15 seconds. So whether it's 15 or 20 minutes, that means it would only take 3 or 4 badly timed interruptions to suck up a whole hour of your day. So sometimes when we feel like we don't have enough time, maybe actually what we don't have enough of is our attention to make good use of our time. And so then it's like, okay, so what are the things that steal my attention? What are my disruptions, distractions, interruptions? Let me open that out as a question. Like, what are the sort of things that would represent those like 1 minute interruptions for you?
I agree with Lorraine. Emails definitely for me. Then we've got a really nice distraction of my family, my dog. That would be a nice distraction, but still a distraction. Children, phone, email social people, media. Everything. Social media, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Phone calls, eating food. That's quite important.
Hunger as well, needing to eat food, that can be distracting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Notifications as well. I think just generally, people stopping by my office asking me to show them something really quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see someone said, I even get distracted. People just walk nearby. Like they don't even have to talk to me. Just being nearby is distracting. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Geraldine, that's a very very British answer, the weather. Definitely. So I mean, arguably it's a noisy world out there. There's loads of things that are vying for our attention. And it's also a noisy world in here. So maybe we can start to look at like, where can we maybe turn down some of that noise? Where can we maybe restrict it or ring fence it? So some examples here from this book, the yellow book, How to Be Really Productive. Things like reducing digital noise. So emails, turn off the email notifications. Just because someone can send you an email any given time of the day doesn't necessarily mean you need to be there ready to read it and respond to it straight away. Email was never designed to be an emergency tool. We don't email the fire department when there's a fire, right? So let's stop using email that way. So maybe turn off the notifications and start to deal with email when you're ready to, not when it happens to arrive. Similarly with other notifications, actually. So things like social media, news alerts. It's amazing like how often everything that you download onto a phone like usually has notifications on by default. Like, do we really need them on? Can we maybe turn them off by default and just turn on the ones where we do need to know? So for example, if my child's school is calling me, I probably want that notification. I do want to know straight away. But if there's been another lovely, cute picture in the puppy WhatsApp group, don't really need to know that. Like I'm happy to go and help myself to that when I'm ready for the distraction rather than it come in and hijack. So turning off like notifications, maybe unsubscribing from things that you don't know, you no longer need anymore. Maybe setting up rules as well. So email, if you filter out some of the subscriptions or notifications, if they're things like, oh, I want to know at some point, but I don't need them to arrive in the inbox, get a rule in place and then filter that away. But then also like things like sometimes you might want to just turn off the Wi-Fi, go dark. And like if this is the thing I need to work on and I don't need to be online for it, maybe I can just go dark for a while and turn off the Wi-Fi, put my phone on to do not disturb. If I'm working as part of a team and there's Teams like chat messages, like maybe put that on to do not disturb. So there's all different ways we can maybe just turn things off. But also maybe look at like closing down all the tabs in your windows and things like that, because that can catch your eye as well, and that can be noisy. When it comes to, I guess, like other people needing you or asking you, I think there was like someone saying, people asking, can I ask you a question, things like that. It might be, there are certain times when you think, well, that's part of my job or that's part of what I need to do. But are there can you ring fence it in any way? So are there certain times when you're like, okay, rather than come and talk to me whenever you got a question, it might be, hey, let's catch up at this time. And then any questions you've got for me, we'll look at it then. In fact, I remember, so again, it's a little story in this book where I spoke to a university. She was the dean of Wolverhampton University at one point, but she's moved on somewhere else now. But she said she used to do this thing called afternoon tea, where for her students, anything they wanted to ask about or they wanted to chat over an assignment or anything like that, she'd let them know, here's when I'm going to be this week for afternoon tea. So if you want to come, I'll even buy you a cup of tea, happy to chat with you. And that's the time when you can find me. And what that meant was that her students didn't need to hunt her down. They didn't need to go like, when am I going to find her? Like, let's go find her office. Let's queue outside and hope I can get hold of her, or send her loads of messages hoping that like it'll bump up to the top or anything like that. They didn't have to do that. So maybe sometimes letting people know, like, here's when I'm available, here's when I'm not. And you can also ask people to hold you accountable as well. So maybe there's something you need to get done. It's like, okay, I do want to meet you for coffee, but I'm going to pop, I do want to meet you for coffee, but I do need to get this thing done first. So this morning, maybe this is my peak attention time. I'm going to work on this. And actually, when I meet you for coffee, can you check that I've done it? And then that helps to create a bit of accountability as well. But it also means that they know you're going to be working on something. So maybe they will leave you alone for the next hour or so. So those are all different ways to kind of just set up your environment, maybe reduce some of that noise. Sometimes the noise comes from your own head, doesn't it? Sometimes the distraction is like, oh, we've run out of milk. Must remember to buy milk today. Or like, oh, did I book that train ticket? Or, oh no, I need to call my mum. I forgot. All of those things. So our brain is a really terrible place to retain information. It's a brilliant place to come up with ideas, not that great to remember them. So rather than trying to keep everything in your head, one of the things that we do as a productivity ninja is we help people to build a second brain. And basically your second brain is like, get it all out of your head, free up some headspace so that you can actually do the thinking rather than trying to remember everything. But also it means that you've got it in front of you, whether that's onto a screen or onto paper. But it means that it's safe. Like I can come back to this when I'm ready to look at it rather than relying on my memory to remind me, because my memory is not great. I mean, even before I had kids, I had baby brain. But like, your brain will, if your brain is trying to hold on to it, it will remind you at all the wrong times. Like when you're trying to get to sleep, when you're trying to relax, it will remind you at all the wrong times. So get it out of your head, start to build a second brain. And then, then you can create the headspace you need for that sense of focus. One of the quotes that, again, I've got in this book was when I spoke to a personal organizer, like someone who organizes spaces. And she had a great quote. She said, clutter is basically unmade decisions. So like when you have a room full of clutter, it's like, I haven't decided what I want to do with this or where I want to put it. So it's just there. And like same thing applies to like clutter in your inbox. and you've got a whole inbox full of stuff. It's like, I haven't decided what I want to do with it. Unmade decisions. Same with like clutter in your head. And it's really interesting that quite often when I look at people's to-do lists, it's actually not a to-do list. It's a to-decide list. It's like a list of decisions. If you have like essay written on your to-do list, what's the next thing you actually need to do? Yes, you need to write the essay, but do essay, what does that mean? So often, if you're looking through your to-do list and you realize that your brain is still having to make a lot of decisions, that's not going to be a to-do list that works for you. So what you might want to do is, yes, do the brain dump first, but then ask yourself, like, what's actually the next thing I need to do? If I was to write this as an instruction to somebody else, and they can actually, I can see them doing it, what would that look like? So it might be, do you know what? I need to read the essay title first. Like, what is this about? Or it might be, I know I need to do some research. I need to go find some journal papers. Or or I'm at the point where I just need to like brainstorm some ideas because I know I've got some ideas in my head. So even just writing that thing as the next thing you need to do on your essay gives you something really tangible and means like you've got a list of things you can actually do rather than a list of things you still need to make some decisions on. And the beauty of that is that when you do the thing, you can actually tick it off. Confession time. Has anyone here ever written something on a to-do list they've already done? Just so they can tick it off. Sid hasn't, Jenny has, I have. Yeah. So the neuroscience behind this is that we get a dopamine hit. Whenever we're able to tick something off a list, we get a dopamine hit and that feels good. And that actually can create a sense of momentum as well. It's like, tick, done it. Okay, what's next? And so again, if you've got a to-do list that actually gives you next physical actions that you can tick off, it means you can get that sense of progress. Otherwise, what tends to happen is you have a list that's got like big important things on, like essay and job applications and all of that kind of stuff. And then you've got little things like, I'll text my friend, or send that email or book those tickets. And you're like, oh, that's easy to do. I can get my dopamine hit easy by doing that. And so that's why we tend to cherry pick like the quick wins, the easy tasks. And then the bigger things get left. And they get worse. So those are all kind of different things to think about. The final thing I'll say in terms of mental capacity, when it comes to decision making, is that our ability to make good judgment decisions is like a muscle. Yes, you can train it to do more, but after so many reps, it will get tired. And when it gets tired, we hit decision fatigue. And so one of the studies that looked into this was a bunch of parole board judges, where they basically looked at how often would they say yes to parole and how often would they say no to parole. And at the beginning of the day, your chances of getting parole were about 60%. As the day went on, it got less. After a break, it went back up again. Just before lunch, you got no chance. After lunch, better chances. End of the day, no chance. So if you're ever up against, like you ever find yourself up for parole, like you want to go, after lunch, not before lunch. If you're ever trying to like maybe ask for an extension or something like that, you might want to go after lunch rather than before lunch. But probably a little bit more wider application is thinking about your own decision making. Like, what does it feel like when you're at decision fatigue? If you've been making lots of really good judgment decisions and the last decision at the end of the day when you think, what on earth am I going to have for dinner? Like, that's the one you can't make. That's what it feels like to hit decision fatigue. And most of us will have a default when it comes to decision fatigue. So for a parole board judge, the default is no, because that's the safest answer. But like, what's your default? So for me, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I'm quite naturally accommodating. My default is I end up saying yes to things I should have said no to. So if I know that about myself, it means that if I can feel that decision fatigue kicking in, I can just go, do you know what? Blanket default, no. Like if I can't think about it, it's a no, or it's a ask me later. And I use that with the kids a lot because otherwise they just run rings around me. But the other thing we can think about is like, if we know that our decision-making capacity is finite, then maybe we can just eliminate or reduce some of the unnecessary decisions. It's like, how often do we like reinvent the wheel? How often do we Do we get sort of carried away and maybe overthink something, and we spend all our decision-making capacity on like one area, and then we're like, oh, I can't think now for the other stuff. So Barack Obama famously only had 2 types of suits when he was in office. And when he was asked about it, he said, well, if I can reduce the amount of decision-making involved in what do I wear today, I can reserve my capacity to make good judgment decisions for the slightly more important things in my work. So maybe sometimes like there might be certain things where you go, do you know what, that doesn't matter. Like I don't need to be sort of overthinking things or a perfectionist about everything. Maybe it can just be plain done. Or even maybe I don't need to do this at all. Let's just not do that. And so that's where sometimes rules and routines can come in handy, because you'll make a decision up front that applies to lots of things. So it might be certain things like, if I know that mornings are my best time, then that's the time I ring fence. Maybe that's the time I say no to meeting someone for a coffee or having a meeting, and I try to put my meetings into the afternoon. Or if it's like, I know I need I've only got capacity to do a certain amount of, for me, I do a lot of travel. So it might be having a rule in place to say, I'm only going to do this much travel or these many trips each week or each month or whatever it is. So putting some rules in place can be a good way of like making some decisions up front. But then also making sure you've got like, maybe part of your rhythm is time when you stop from the doing and go, right, what decisions do I need to make? And do the thinking, do that up front. And maybe do that when you're fresh rather than leaving it until you're not. So sometimes that might be pre-committing to stuff. So I know that one of the questions that got sent in ahead of this event was around scheduling and sort of time management, if you like, and like what role does that play? Sometimes scheduling can be a really good way of pre-committing to something. So if by that time you're going to be like, do I really feel like doing this? Do I really feel like going for a run? Do I really feel like doing this, like, this essay or this assignment? If by then you're going to be like close to decision fatigue, you might just go, I'll just F it, hit snooze, don't care. But if you have actually put it, if you pre-committed to it, if you put it in the diary, maybe you've arranged to meet up with someone who's a study buddy or like to go for a run with, or that sort of thing, then you've pre-committed to it and you're much more likely to show up because you've made the decision up front and then you just need to follow through. So those are all things around our mental capacity. But I also want to talk about our emotional capacity, because in the future, work is increasingly about the heart. So maybe it's the quality of our relationships that matter, as well as the quality of our ideas or our thinking or our decisions. And our emotional capacity is actually even more finite than our mental capacity. So I'm going to just read out a little bit from this book here. This is Struggle, The Surprising Truth, Beauty and Opportunity Hidden in Life's Shittier Moments. I didn't actually ask if I could swear on this event. Okay, so let's just try this as a thought experiment. So if you just imagine, think of a fish, now an elephant, now a cup of tea, now a clock tower, now a cucumber. Now imagine feeling excitement, now embarrassment, now grief, now gratitude. Takes longer to switch, doesn't it? And so what I often find is that, in a lot of our work, we talk about our cognitive load. We talk about how many decisions we need to make, how much thinking we need to do. But what about the emotional load? Because actually it takes longer to process our emotions compared to our thoughts or our decisions. So emotional processing takes longer than information processing. And when we don't recognize that, what can sometimes happen is that we just try and squeeze as much into the day. And then we think, why am I so knackered? Why am I feeling burnt out? Or maybe it's like, I normally really enjoy this, but I'm not right now. I'm just really stressed. So that's sometimes when we hit overwhelm, when we hit overload or burnout. But also when we haven't got enough of our emotional capacity, sometimes what happens is our lizard brain kicks in. So our lizard brain is also known as the chimp brain. And it's basically the amygdala. So it's the part of your brain that is responsible for keeping you alive. And it does that by activating the fight or flight stress response. And so, it might be, you might find it happening when, if you're already really tired and, or you've been through a lot of, emotional uncertainty, or like, a lot of emotional intensity, and then someone sends you an email or a text message and you go, what? Like, you weren't expecting it. And you find yourself in like email rage. Anyone ever have email rage? It's like road rage, but with email. Yep. So that's your lizard brain kicking in. If you've ever been on the receiving end of someone else's email rage, like, and you get defensive, again, that's their lizard brain kicking in, but that's your lizard brain responding to it, because it feels a lot like being under attack. And so, sometimes what happens is that we're trying to operate at such a speed and cram so many things in that it's our lizard brain that's in charge, not our human brain. And our human brain is much better at creative thinking, critical thinking, good judgment decisions, relationship building, all the good stuff. But the other thing that the lizard brain is responsible for is a lot of our procrastination. Because when we find ourselves procrastinating, it's usually our lizard brain going, "Ooh, that looks hard. That looks scary." It's like, "Oh, that might go wrong." Or even just like, "That's really boring. Don't want to do it." And so it's almost like the flight part of the fight or flight instinct. So it's like, I just want to get away. I don't want to think about it. I'm going to hide away, or I'm going to like displacement activity. It's like, oh, look at all these emails I need to reply to. I'm going to do that instead. So you'll know when you're procrastinating. I know when I'm procrastinating when the house is really tidy. Because it's like, I'd rather do the housework than anything else. So that's when I know I'm procrastinating. So you'll know when it's kicking in. But if you recognize that, that's my lizard brain in play, then what we'll realize is that's a weird part of my brain trying to protect me. It's trying to protect me from a perceived threat. And the interesting thing about the lizard brain is, it's responding, and it's really useful when it responds to a life threat situation. But more often than not, in everyday work and life and study, it's not a life-threatening situation, but it's maybe an uncomfortable situation. And the lizard brain doesn't know the difference between a social threat and a physical threat. Because back in the days when we all lived in tribes, like, if you were rejected from the tribe, you probably wouldn't survive. So it was a life or death situation. So if you think about the things that you procrastinate on, usually there's an element of social threat to it, or a perceived social threat. So it might be, I don't know if I'm going to do a good job here. So maybe there's a sense of judgment. If it's like, I'm going to look a fool. And that's the reason why public speaking is often seen as like a greater fear than death. Because it's like, I'm standing up in front of a whole lot of people. I might embarrass myself. I'm going to get judged. And let's face it, like when you're studying, the pieces of work you put in are going to get judged, aren't they? So there is an element of judgment there. So it's like, oh, that explains why I've got this anxiety, or why I want to procrastinate, is because I don't want to be judged. But of course, we can remember, even if we do get judged, it's not a life or death situation. Like, and so maybe we can then kind of just like let those self-preservation instincts die down a bit and just go, okay, it's not a life or death situation. I understand that my lizard brain's trying to protect me, but maybe I don't need it to right now. And then maybe we can start to kind of go, okay, what can I do about this thing? And maybe even just acknowledging that helps the emotion, side of it to kind of, simmer down a little bit. But what we can also do is activate curiosity in the face of fear. So fear will give us a really narrow vision, because if you are like genuinely in a life-threatening situation, you don't want to see everything. You just want to see like, what's the weak spot in my enemy if I'm having to fight, or what's the escape route if I'm having to run away. Whereas when we activate curiosity, we get like a wider vision. So we start to notice everything. Like we start to notice, different nuances, different perspectives, different angles, maybe different like creative routes. So I remember we're going back many, many years now, when I was at university, But I was really proud that one of my best pieces of work that I got a first for was actually my year out dissertation. And I'm convinced that the reason why I had that was I picked a topic that no one had written about in textbooks. So I couldn't find any references in books. I had to go to journal papers. And I'm convinced that because I had to go and find this, and I was quoting journal papers and that sort of thing, it made it a much more interesting piece of work, and probably showed that I was kind of referencing, I don't know, like, this is my own theory. Someone in the academic world can tell me differently. But my point is that sometimes when you hit that struggle, when you hit that, like that roadblock where the conventional route is shut, fear will say, oh shit, basically. It will be like, this is wrong, this is bad, get out of here. But curiosity will say, oh, something's interesting, this is unexpected, let's take a closer look. And it's often when we take a closer look that we can find maybe the unconventional route. Maybe that's when we innovate, maybe that's when we're more creative. And so maybe that's where that surprising truth, beauty, or opportunity can kind of come out of those shittier moments. So there's definitely, I think, a lot to be said about recognizing when you're in struggle, how do you deal with that? How do you activate curiosity rather than just ride through on fear? But also recognizing that in this day and age, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that can have a big effect on our emotional capacity as well. Because the lizard brain likes things to be safe and familiar. So if things keep changing, if things are uncertain, it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, I don't know if we're safe anymore. And we're having to kind of like check and so it takes its toll. I remember somebody saying to me towards the end of lockdown, when we'd been sort of in lockdown for a long time, and saying, I haven't done anything. I've been on furlough. I haven't had anything to do. I've not been homeschooling. I've had it easy, but I am knackered. Why am I so knackered? And part of that, I think, is to do with the amount of uncertainty that we've had to deal with. Because when we're on that uncertainty, we're on alert. Our lizard brain is on alert, always going like, what's going to happen? Am I safe? Like, what's the next thing? And it might be that you might notice it yourself. You might notice that like maybe your lizard brain is slightly more sensitive because things keep changing and you don't know where you stand. Or maybe there's like also going back to that mental capacity, there's more decisions I need to keep making because I don't know what I'm dealing with. So there was a point where going out to buy milk involved a lot of decision making, because it's like, have I already been out today? Am I allowed to go out? Have I got my mask? All of those kind of things. So just recognize that sometimes if we're riding through a lot of uncertainty, a lot of the work is a heavy mental load and a heavy emotional load, rather than necessarily things I need to do. Like, so it's not just the doing that's heavy, it's the thinking and it's the feeling that makes it a heavy situation. So you might need to give yourself more space. You might have to you might just need to give yourself a break to say, maybe productivity in an uncertain situation looks different from productivity when I know exactly what I'm doing. And maybe when I hit that place where I go, I don't know, it doesn't mean I'm in the wrong place. It doesn't mean I've gone off course. Maybe it actually means I'm in the right place for discovery, for learning and for growth, because that's what it looks like to be learning, is I get to the place where I don't know and I don't have the answers. But again, that can feel unfamiliar because we're so used to knowing. In the workplace, I'm dealing with this a lot at the moment, particularly with leaders, because they're like, I'm so used to people coming to me for answers. Like, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm supposed to know what we're doing, but we're going into uncharted territory. And so I don't know sometimes. And that makes me feel like maybe I'm not cut out for this. But actually, maybe now the rules of success are different here. And it'll be the same for you when you're studying. Like, a lot of what you're doing is expanding your territory, expanding your knowledge. It is going to those places where you don't know, and actually that's where you will learn. That's where you'll stretch your horizons. And even just telling yourself that, like, I'm in the right place, I'm not in the wrong place. Again, that's different, especially, I mean, I know when I was at school, I was a straight A student. And so going to university, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not used to this. I'm used to being able to get the answers really quickly. And so it's a different type of learning, isn't it? So there is that as well. Final thought I'll leave you with is just the idea of the morning after. So I'll just read you a little bit from here. The thing they often don't show in epic movies and tales of glory is the morning after. When the adrenaline and glory subsides and is replaced with aches or pains or fatigue, the triumphant warrior who's now awkwardly creaking, trying to avoid the sore spots of armor chafing or delayed muscle onset soreness. The marathon runner who's now hobbling slowly with a swollen ankle while toddlers and pushchairs race past. The times when you ache and creak, feeling flat and drained, when the adrenaline has left your system and you just need a good lie down or a good cry. After the glory and the glamour of battle comes the morning after. The hangover that takes us by surprise. My client Sarah was feeling flat. She couldn't really put her finger on why. After all, this week was relatively quiet compared to the emotional roller coaster of last week. But when we started talking about everything that had happened, we realized she had lived through a pretty traumatic time. Post-traumatic hangover. The hard work is done, the danger is past, the victory is won. That's when the rest of our body and brain functions kick back in. That's when we allow ourselves to feel and come to terms with the full force of what we've been through. That's when the adrenaline wears off and the pain sets in. Interestingly, one of the functions of adrenaline is to decrease our ability to feel pain, because pain's primary function is to tell us to stop. And when we're in fight or flight, the thing we must not do is stop. It's only when we get to safety that we stop, and that's when it all catches up with us. That's when we experience the letdown effect, which is like a pattern in which people come down with an illness or develop flare-ups of a chronic condition, not during a concentrated period of stress, but after it dissipates. So like when you go on holiday and the first day of the holiday, you get a cold. That's exactly the letdown effect. So maybe if you're feeling shitty, your feelings aren't telling you the truth of what you're experiencing right now. Maybe they're telling you what you've been through. And there's nothing to fix in the here and now. It's just acknowledging what you've been through. You're feeling shit not because you're going through shit, but because you've come through. And so that's what I call like the struggle hangover, basically. And sometimes it's worth remembering that like when you're in that place of feeling like, what's wrong with me? It might just be like, you've just been through a lot. And when it comes to then bringing it back to like productivity and planning and scheduling, or even time management, thinking, actually, if you know you've got some big things coming up, if you know there are some intense periods, maybe give yourself some space. Like beforehand, yes, to prep for it, but also afterwards to like recover from it. Rather than kind of feel like I just need to run on into the next thing. So there's a few more things I might talk about in terms of recharging, but I just want to like stop there and pause and get a sense of like what's landing with people, what questions have we got, and what thoughts do you guys have?
We've got a couple of things in the chat. Let me just have a read. There's Nadine has put something about being a bit confused because they're always intentionally throwing themselves into unknown or uncertain situations. So Nadine, maybe you could sort of expand on that a bit for us. He also said that he's the king of procrastination, which I think is a good title.
Love it.
But yeah, so maybe he's still procrastinating even though he's throwing himself into these unknown situations. Yes, Nadeem, if you can type, sorry. That would be great, thank you. And while you are typing, I could jump to Ben's question, which is a bit of a long one, so I'm going to just read it out word for word because that's probably the easiest way. So he said, my to-do list won't stop growing no matter how hard I work, which is causing me to become paralysed in panic and unappreciative of what I need to do to achieve. No matter how much I achieve, I cannot break free from the worry of not enough time. And this causes me to spend way more time on my list than I should, therefore losing more time. And I'm so stuck in this vicious cycle for 15 years now. Wow, that's I can see how that go, because I do that as well. So and yeah, so that's it really. A big problem, but
Yeah, definitely. And you're not alone, Ben. You're not alone at all. So the longer title on this book, How to Be Really Productive, is Achieving Clarity and Getting Results in a World Where Work Never Ends. And like, that's the reality of the kind of world we live and work in, is the work never ends. There's always going to be more stuff. The to-do list won't stop growing. And actually, if that's the case, then maybe the aim of the game is not to get to the end of the list. Maybe it's to feel like you're surfing that workflow rather than drowning in it. So there's a couple of things I'm going to say here. One is, let's stop using productivity as the goal that I need to get to, and let's start using it as a tool. So what that means is, rather than seeing end of the list as like, this is where I need to get to feel like I'm doing enough. Let's start with enough. Like, I am enough, I do enough. What am I going to go and do from here? So we're not constantly chasing this thing that never comes. We're like just starting with, okay, so I've got today, how much time have I got? How much energy, attention have I got? What's the best thing for me to do? And like, you're starting from that point. And then maybe giving yourself a closed list to work from on that day. So if you think you can get 12 things done, start with 3. And if you're anything like me and overestimate how much you can get done, like, start with 3. And like, when you get to the end of those 3 things, give yourself that kudos and go, right, I did the thing. And then, do I want to stop here? Do I want to do more? My choice. So I don't need to keep doing in order to feel like I'm achieving. So part of this is almost changing your mindset of what success looks like. So we often talk about success being like achieving or getting somewhere, like the destination. Whereas from a productivity perspective, I find it much more helpful to think of success as doing. So it's like, maybe success at the end of the year is getting the grade, but maybe success today is opening that file, getting a few bullet points down, and booking in that meeting with my supervisor. So it's like, it's having those really tangible things of this, what doing success looks like. Because when you do those things, eventually you will get to the place where you get the grade. But just focusing on the outcome doesn't give you what you need in terms of the progress and the actions and the momentum. And the other thing I would suggest as well, to counter that feeling of like it's never enough, is to get into the habit of writing yourself a to-do list rather than a to-do list. So ta-da, this is what I have done, this is what I'm proud of, this is what I'm happy with. And it could be something you do like on a weekly basis, or just like at the end of a day when you feel like you've got nothing done, like just write yourself a to-do list, like, here are the things I did do, and here are the things I am pleased with or proud of. Because it's amazing how often, and actually there's a study that suggests that as human beings, we have 3 times more positive experiences than negative ones. But it doesn't feel like that because we also have a negativity bias. Because from a survival instinct point of view, your lizard brain wants to notice the things that go wrong, because those are the things that could hurt you or kill you. So it's like, those are the things we home in on. Whereas actually what we can do is counterbalance that and go, okay, what are the good things that happened? And then when we practice noticing that, then we notice them more, and it gives us that sense of satisfaction and momentum and motivation as well.
I've just written to-do list down because I love that. That's very fun. So we've got Nadine came back, so thank you, Nadine, for going into it in a bit more detail. So they said, what I meant was that I intentionally put myself in unknown situations because it gives me a sense of achievement afterwards. But they also said that the big problem is that their mind leaves the now situation too much and goes away to something else or somewhere else. That's the biggest issue. Even during this talk, I stopped listening so many times that I have to listen to all of it again. Well, don't worry, it is being recorded and you will be able to watch it all again. So don't worry about that point. But yes, that is a big problem. Yeah. So yeah, over to you, Grace.
Okay, so Nadine, I'd say don't set yourself the sort of bar of success of like, I have to grab everything from this talk. Like, if you take one thing away and that's the one thing you use, brilliant. That's progress. And I'd say, see this as a resource that you can come back to. So it was like, oh, okay, I put that in action. That's working for me. I want to pick up another idea, come back and listen to it again. So again, I think this is like kind of anti-perfectionism. So I think we can be quite fixated on like, everything's got to be perfect. I've got to take everything I can from this. I've got to get 100% on stuff. Whereas actually, if we aim for perfection, we'll never get there. And this is me talking from experience as well. I was a bit of a perfectionist. For me, it was actually having kids that was my learning ground on like, yeah, can't get to perfectionism. And my mantra these days is to be a good enough mum most of the time, with intermittent lapses into hopelessness and brilliance. So give yourself permission to have brilliant days and hopeless days, but always be looking at like what's good enough, what does progress look like rather than perfection, what would make things like 1% better. And that whole thing of like leaving the now situation, maybe it's just whenever you notice your mind wandering off, it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So again, fear would go, something's wrong. Curiosity goes, that's interesting. And maybe just write it down and then ask yourself, like, do I want to go there right now? Or do I want to stay here? And if it's, I want to stay here, they know that you've written it down, so you can come back to it and you can follow that little like thoughts later. You can go down that rabbit hole later, but you caught yourself and you're in the here and now. And equally, if you do find that you've kind of gone off track and you find yourself down a rabbit hole, maybe it's just going, okay, that's interesting. Let's reflect, like, how did I get here? And it might be, do you know what? I had that notification on and that just took me down that rabbit hole. So maybe next time I'll turn the notification off, because then you can you can apply that reflective learning, if you like, to help you to refine your environment and your working practices.
Great. So we've also got Alina, who wants to know how to deal with the boring tasks, which I think everyone, that's a big question. How to overcome a subject or module at uni they don't find interesting at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one, because so one of the things I find is if you're procrastinating over something that's scary, you want to lower the stakes. But if you're procrastinating over something that's boring, you might need to up the stakes, like raise the stakes, find something to make it more interesting. I remember actually one of my friends works in quite a creative business. She's quite creative herself. But one of the things she needs to do sometimes is work with spreadsheets. And she said, I've just got this mental block with spreadsheets. Like, it's so boring. Don't want to deal with it. But what she found was if she changes the colors on the spreadsheet, she can deal with it. Like, it's pretty. Therefore, my brain can stay there. Really weird, but it works for her. Now, if all you do is change the colors on the spreadsheet and never actually use a spreadsheet, that's procrastination. But if you try changing the colors on the spreadsheet, it helps you to engage with it better, then that works. That's preparation. That helps you to stay engaged. So, Alina, I'd say look for ways, like, get creative about this. Look for ways to find something interesting, or to maybe change some of the environment, or what tools you bring in, like what stationery you bring in. I don't know, like just play with it and find ways of making it interesting. It could be that it doesn't have to be something you do on your own. It could be if you've got other friends and people in the same course who also find it really hard to stay focused and engaged. It's like, okay, how can we turn this into a game for each other? How can we help each other stay engaged? And then sometimes it's like seeing the point. So why does it matter to you? What's the point for you? So sometimes we can, like, if we don't see the point to something, it feels quite demotivating. It's like, I have to do it. But if you see the point to it, or at least claim something that is meaningful to you, that can help you to ride through the discomfort of something that's boring. So for example, like one year I used to have a project decluttering one summer, because my living room was just full of toys and it was awful. But I hate tidying, I hate decluttering. So even just looking at that on a list is like, oh, I don't want to do it. So I renamed that Project Reclaim Living Room, because I realized, like, that's the point. Like, the point is I want my living room back. So then, if it's Project Reclaim Living Room, then that's why I'm doing it. It's not about the decluttering, it's about reclaiming that living space. So sometimes the words we use or the names we use can change how we feel about it as well.
Great. Someone put spreadsheet plus classical music.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good one. There's a couple of questions that were pre-submitted that were more about so there's someone asked for any advice for people who have ADHD, and we've chatted about this, but I think it would be good to just touch on that. And then also someone else who was struggling to sleep for months, so they've got into a routine where they're not sleeping, and how do they get out of that routine again? So two very different questions there.
Yeah, okay. So ADHD, I'm not an expert in ADHD, so I don't know the ins and outs of it. I have worked with some people who do have ADHD, and I think my starting point is always like, okay, tell me how your brain works. Tell me how it likes to work. And rather than trying to fight it or control it, it's like, how do we channel it? So if you imagine your brain is like this brilliant force of nature, and it's just that it's going all over the place, and sometimes it's working against you. It's like, how do you channel that energy and that force of nature in a way that's going to serve you well? And sometimes it might be an environmental thing. It might be, do you know what, when I have this and this and this, and when I have too many notifications on, for example, my attention goes and I can't focus. It's like, okay, I need to switch those things off, and then I can focus. Sometimes it might just be recognizing, like, what are those pitfalls? But also sometimes it's like giving yourself permission. Like, if I've known so many people who've gone, I don't feel productive because I can't concentrate for 8 hours a day. It's like, yes, but what do you do in that hour, that 1 hour that you can concentrate? If you can do just as much, like, brilliant work in that 1 hour as someone else does in 8, that's great. You don't have to do it the same way that everybody else does. So, rather than thinking it doesn't look productive or it doesn't look right, it's like, again, going back to purpose. So often, like, one of the first things I talk about in the yellow book is purpose, meaning, and joy. So rather than productivity just being about productivity's sake, it's like, what's the purpose? What's meaningful to you? But also, what brings you joy? Because when we are in that place of enjoying our work, the experience of our work, we tend to do our best work. We have our best ideas. We come up with our best work, and we also show up at our best as well. So if you're doing anything like relating to other people, or anything where your energy comes in, like, that's when you channel your best work and your best energy. So I'd say work with your brain rather than against it.
Right,
Remind me of the second question, Jenny.
So there was one about ADHD and then one about sleep routines, and they've got into a more they're struggling to sleep, and that now they've got into routine of not sleeping, which definitely not good.
Yeah, no, I can relate. I'm naturally a night owl, so if you left me to my own devices, I'm much better at night. But then the rest of the world is daytime. I have to get up and do the school run and things like that. So sometimes we just slip into those habits, don't we? There's a brilliant book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So if you haven't read that, then I definitely recommend that. That's fascinating, and looks into, like, what happens in your brain when you sleep. It's not just an absence of activity, like, loads of stuff happen in your brain when you sleep. So I think that for me is a really good just motivator to go, okay, this is why I need to get better at my sleep. But then in terms of what to do, I think often I find, like, just looking for, like, 1 point improvements can be helpful. So rather than, like, I've got to overhaul the whole thing, like, what would a 1 point improvement look like? So it might be, I'm going to aim for 1 early night this week, rather than I've got to be in bed by a certain time. Or it might be, I'll try a screen-free evening. Like, let's just, because there's a lot of research around blue light, isn't there? That if you're on screens all the time, it keeps your brain going. So maybe I'll try an evening where I'm away from screens, where I'll read a book or have a bath or whatever it is. So I'd say treat it as an experiment, but do little experiments. So rather than, like, why can't I get this right? It's like, okay, what's going to help? What helps me to relax? So some of those things are, the practical things are things like switching off your screens, maybe doing a brain dump. So if you've got a lot going on in your head, then maybe doing that brain dump and writing things down just to get it out of your head, so that you can go to sleep and you can come back. When you wake up, you've got it there, it's safe. So that can help as well. There's also, and again, I'm kind of going slightly outside my expertise now. This is more what I've read rather than my area of expertise, but things like when we eat, like, so if you're eating quite late, then sometimes your brain doesn't, like, you're not ready for sleep. So maybe bringing forwards your meal times can help to sort of tell your brain, okay, now I'm getting ready for sleep now. Speaking as someone who's just recovering from jet lag, That's very much what I'm doing at the moment, is like, just, okay, let's just eat earlier, stop eating, like tell myself, tell my body, now is sleep time, now, now is the time to go to sleep. And I think the other thing I've been told is don't beat yourself up too much. So if you're lying in bed and you're not asleep yet, just, rather than go, why am I not asleep? It's like, just give yourself a break to go, it's okay, I'm just going to lie here, I'm just going to relax. And sort of avoid the sort of guilt, because that's not going to help.
We had someone who is definitely into their apps. So they've used quite a few different productivity apps. And so they've mentioned ClickUp for tasks, iPad 9th generation for all programs, Remarkable 2 for note taking, which is great because I hadn't heard of any of these, so I'm going to have to go and look into them. But they are interested in tools that really help entrepreneurs and students alike, and they were wondering if you had any suggestions along that lines or those lines. They put no pressure at the end.
This is a really good question. This is one that I get asked a lot. Like, what's the best app, Grace? What's the best tool? What's the best piece of software that's going to get me super organized, never going to have to worry again? And usually I have to apologize and say there is no magic bullet. There are lots of tools out there, but the tool is only ever as good as the person who's using it. And in fact, one of the workshops that we run is how to be a productivity ninja, which is a full day workshop, but we also do like a 6 weeks to Ninja, it's called, where we help people to build their second brain and then to choose the tool of their choice. Because productivity is really personal. So what tool works for one person may not be the same tool that works for someone else. And what you don't want to do is just keep chasing tool after tool after tool. That's what my colleague Graham Olcott, who's our original productivity ninja, he's the one who wrote the book How to Be a Productivity Ninja, but he calls it productivity porn. If you're just constantly downloading tools and you're not actually getting any of the work done, that's productivity porn. It's not going to help. So instead, it's, pick a tool of your choice and then invest the time to get it working for you. The tool I personally use is called Todoist. It works for me. There may be other tools that do more and have more features and functions, but at the moment, this is the one that works for me, so I'm sticking with it. There is a tool called Notion, which I've not used myself, but I've been told by several different people that it's quite customizable. So for the person that who entered that question, if you're looking for one that's quite customizable, that you can kind of get it working exactly how you want it to, you might want to check out Notion. That's me saying it, having not actually used it myself, but it's just one that I've picked up on the periphery. But I'd say if that's something, an area that you want to dive deeper into, like how do I structure my second brain? What tool do I use? How do I get it working for me? Then check out, I think Graham is running a 6 weeks to Ninja pretty soon. I think it starts in November or something like that. So if you go to thinkproductive.co.uk and then look at public workshops, you'll find 6 weeks to Ninja, and you'll find when Graham's running his.
And we will be sending out an email after the event, so I'll make sure I include that link in there as well. But all the people that are asking about recordings, don't worry, this is being recorded, and we will be sharing the link to the video with you, so you can rewatch all of this or little bits of it as you need. We have another question from Ali, who has said that they recently had a very bad experience that even gave them anxiety, and they moved away from it and starting over. The problem is that they're facing now is that they can't do any of their tasks out of fear of experiencing the same thing that they did before.
Yeah, it's I guess it's similar to what you're describing there, Ali. To me, sounds a little bit similar to PTSD, and I'm saying that from a very layperson's perspective. I'm not a psychologist. But that whole, like, it's your brain trying to remind you of what that felt like and going, oh, we don't want to go there again. So from a practical perspective, it could be just giving yourself the time to, maybe I find journaling quite helpful. Maybe you get a piece of paper out and just write down, like, almost give that lizard brain a voice and let it have a rant and let it say like all the things, all the disaster thinking, all the anxiety, like get it out of the open. I mean, one of the things I talk about in struggle is what I call my 3 shits process for dealing with struggle or navigating struggle. And the first is, oh shit. It's just recognizing and naming the feeling or the fear. Because when we don't give ourselves permission to acknowledge it, we just try to jump to resolution too quickly. When we do that, like we're looking away from it constantly, but it's still there. It's still there and still lagging away. And then it's like the shadow that looms over you. So if you can kind of like almost turn around and just face the shadow and go, well, what is this thing? And maybe give it some substance. You can then maybe look at, well, what is this thing that I'm dealing with now? Is it the same thing or is it different? There's a Martin Seligman, a psychologist, he came up with what he called the 3 Ps. And I think he linked it to things like learned helplessness, but he said basically we make things pervasive, permanent, and personal. So it's like, it's pervasive, it's like it's not just one thing, it's everything. Permanent is like it's all the time, it's not just this one time. And personal, it's like it's my fault. It's not just it went wrong, but I am wrong. And so kind of, those are some of the ways that we tend to respond to anxiety. And again, it comes from that place of wanting to protect ourselves. But it's almost like, if you think of your lizard brain as like an overzealous health and safety person, there's this like one threat, but we're just going to put a massive fence around it so nobody can get anywhere close to it. Like you're not going to climb the tree, you're not even going to touch the tree. And so, maybe if we can just start to go, okay, what is it about this tree that might have a risk to it? And what does that risk look like? And how can we mitigate it? That might help you to see the thing for what it actually is rather than what the anxiety is telling you about. So that's kind of, that's what I have to offer. But equally, depending on your anxiety levels, maybe check out things like CBT, things like counseling can be really helpful to kind of help you unpack that kind of thing.
Perfect. And if that is something that you want to look into and you're at university, then your university will have a whole host of ways to support you. So all you need to do is ask for help and they will be there to support you. Someone else popped in that the Pomodoro technique is very useful. So I like that one. If you're struggling to stay focused, that one's quite a good one, I think, because it gives you a break quite regularly. So you sort of have these blitz moments of like doing something and then a break, which I think probably would work quite well for me, actually.
It's also a really good way of getting started. Like if there's a big thing, it's like, I'm not going to do all of that. I'm just going to do 25 minutes of it. Like gives you that permission to go, I'll dip my toe in the water and then I can leave it. So like makes it easier. It's like, was it, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I'm just going to do one little bite and then I'm going to give myself full permission to take a break.
Yeah, because a lot of students in the past at our events have struggled with the white page thing, that they've just got a whole blank page and where do you actually start and how do you get things on the paper? And that would be a really good way to just get some stuff down. It doesn't really matter whether it's good or not, it's just getting over that first sort of point of what do I do?
Yeah, sometimes like it's like start badly. In fact, like there's an old writer's adage, isn't it, to write drunken, edit sober. The idea of like start giving yourself permission to start badly, because the whole point of starting is just to start, and then you can refine it and you can improve it and edit it when as you go along.
Definitely. We've got someone saying, how can you change the mental blockness of fear and uncertainties that make you feel numb even though you want to do better, and are there things that can help with that?
That's a really good question. I think that sort of numbness can, I guess, be a variation of the flight instinct. So it's the freeze instinct, basically. It's like if I play dead, then this predator might pass me by. It's that kind of thing. So I guess it's helpful to recognize where that comes from. Again, this is trying to protect me from something. But then also maybe sometimes it's like numbness is a way of just not facing like, how do I feel? So maybe trying to name the feelings or name the fears can be a good way to start. But also sometimes it's helpful just to kind of get used to feeling again. Like if you're going through a period where you're like, actually, I just don't feel like I felt anything, then maybe just look for ways to feel a little bit of joy. So maybe you don't have to deal with that big scary thing or that horrible thing right now. Let's just go look for some treasure, like go find some joy, and so give yourself permission to feel anything. Like, so it doesn't have to be related to that thing. It's that whole idea of tinkering around the edges rather than having to tackle it head on. Because when we tinker and play around the edges, sometimes our little brain goes, oh, okay, there's nothing big going on here. I can go back to sleep now, you carry on. So that can help. And there is an interesting thing around joy. So I interviewed an occupational psychologist in this book, in the Yellow Book, and called Rob Archer, and he said, what's the difference between exhaustion and burnout? And he said that burnout is exhaustion minus joy. So we're tired, we're exhausted, but then what we do is we take away the thing that gives us joy. Like maybe it's like, oh, I'm too busy to do that, or I don't have enough energy, I can't be bothered. And then we take away the thing that gives us joy, and that's when we are at risk of burnout. So maybe if you're in a place where you're not there yet, you're not at burnout, but you're going, hang on, I am feeling a bit exhausted, like make sure you have the things that bring you joy, make sure that's a priority rather than a luxury. But if you're in a place where you're feeling maybe a little bit burnt out already, it might be about finding your way back to just enjoying and just noticing those little pockets of joy to begin with, because the thing that you notice, the thing you focus on, is the thing that usually grows. So maybe kind of go on a treasure hunt for little tiny moments of joy.
I like that, treasure hunt for joy.
Yeah.
So, especially at the moment in autumn, there's such beautiful colours in nature that I'm sure there's something that everyone could enjoy just by going out of the door.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually there's something that I sometimes encourage people to do is to give yourself like a pick-me-up playlist. Because when we talked about decision fatigue earlier, so sometimes when you get to your downtime, it's like, finally, like the assignment's in, I've hit the deadline, I've got a day off, I am knackered, I don't know what to do. And then what we end up doing is we sort of default to whatever's convenient. So it's like the junk food option rather than the like one that actually makes us feel good. So one thing you can do to sort of counteract that is whenever you notice something that brings you joy, just make a note of that somewhere. And I call it my pick-me-up playlist. And it becomes like a menu of things you can choose from. So when you do have that downtime and you go, I don't know what to do, you can look through that and go, oh yeah, it just reminds you, these are the things that I can choose from. These are the things that bring me joy. I'll pick one of them and I'll press play and do that.
That's really good as well. I'm going to have to write that down with my to-do list. So I think we've probably got time for a couple more questions and then we'll do a roundup. So there's another question on the chat saying, does having a functional routine aid time management? Which I suppose it's like you're saying that you've got the zombie times and the not zombie times, and that can change. So is a routine a good idea or a bad idea?
It can be both. It can be either. So routines can be a really good way of, when I talked about decision making and like pre-committing, if you've decided like on a routine, it means you've made that decision once and you can just reuse that decision over and over again. So that can be really helpful. And part of this is dependent on your personality. Some people love having that routine, love having that certainty, and it just means I know exactly what I'm doing. I can do it. It feels good. Other people go, yeah, that's not going to work for me. Like, I'm going to rebel against that routine. I don't like it, when everything's all certain like that. I want that sense of unknown. I want a sense of adventure. I want to be able to choose what I do. And one of the things that I find helpful is if you think of a river, the river only flows because there are banks to that river providing some sort of support and structure. So you take away the banks, it becomes a stagnant pool of water and nothing flows. But if you put too much structure in, it becomes a dam and nothing flows. So we need some structure to help things to flow, but not too much structure that it stifles our creativity and our energy. And the level of structure you have in place will be personal. So some people love having lots of structure in place and everything kind of set, like a set timetable, set routines, always having the same breakfast, things like that, because it's helpful for them to then not have to think about those things. For other people, it's like, for me, actually choosing what I have for breakfast is part of my joy. And so so for me, it's like, okay, there are certain structures I need to have in place. So for example, I've got my boundaries in terms of my working hours. I tend to take most of the school holidays off, and so that gives me, like, I work in sort of term, like half terms basically, so blocks of 6 to 8 weeks, and then I have time off. But then in terms of what I do in a day, I might give myself a menu to choose from, like, here are like 3 things, here's a zombie task, here's a proactive attention task, here's something that's like maybe in the middle, and then I can choose what to do when I feel like it. So it's given me enough structure that I'm not just going, I've got loads of time and no idea what I'm doing. It gives me enough structure, but also enough flexibility that works for me, because my personality is that I need to have variety and I need to have flexibility. If you tell me I have to do the same thing every day, that's not going to work. I'm going to check out.
Well, that sort of links into, so someone's asked, what's your top tip for separating the different demands of everyday life? And then for them, it's studying for a master's while working and writing a book, along with all the other adulting stuff. And how do they keep, they're just wondering how to keep on top of them all and avoiding overwhelm at the same time.
Yeah. I think it's worth remembering. Somebody asked me ages ago about that whole thing of like, can you have it all? And one of the things I talk about is like, having it all doesn't mean doing it all, and it doesn't mean being everybody to being everything to everybody. It's more about being you with everything that you've got. So if you are wearing different hats, you've got different things going on, sometimes we can get into that place of perfectionism of like, here's everything that success might look like in that role or in that field. But maybe we need to start being selective about, like, what does it look like for me? What are the things that matter to me? As a mum, for example, and like, one of the things I decided early on is I am not the mother that makes costumes. Like, just not me. One of my other friends is like, she always buys the cakes for the cake sale, and whenever people go, oh, that was amazing, it's like, yeah, thanks, I bought them all myself. And it's like, oh, so I think there's something about giving yourself permission to show up as your best self, not as everybody's best selves combined, but also then recognizing, okay, so what is it that matters to me? So defining success on your own terms, going for definitely not perfection, go for progress rather than perfection. But then also, I find having that sort of rhythm of review, where you take a step back and go, okay, maybe it's a practical thing, like, what does the next week look like? What do I need to make space for? What do I need to say no to? Where do I need to put those boundaries in place? But also on a wider thing, like, one of the questions I ask myself is like, how am I showing up as the CEO of my own life? What decisions do I need to make with that CEO hat on? Because when we're in the thick of it, it's hard to see that bigger picture. When we're in the thick of it and someone's asking, like, can you please come and help us with this? I'm like, I want to say yes, but then what am I saying no to if I say yes to that? And so recognizing, like, what are those CEO decisions I need to make helps me to then be able to show up at my best to whoever I'm with, and to whatever it is that I'm trying to do at the time.
Great. So I think that's probably taken us to the closing, and I just want to say thank you very much, Grace, for coming and joining us for this. It's been really helpful. I think I've found it helpful. Siddharth's nodding along, so I think he's definitely found it helpful as well. So yeah, thank you very much for that. And there's so many tips that we picked up on, and I think all the attendees will do as well, and all the students that haven't been able to attend and are watching the video as well. So thank you very much, Grace. I don't know whether you want to say a few words as a closing to everyone.
Yeah, what I'd say is just to kind of point to the books, because I know you guys are a books company. So this one is the productivity book. So if it's kind of productivity tactics, techniques, it's been kind of talked about as like the companion for the journey. And in fact, the award that it won was the Commuters Read Award. It's like, apparently it feels like I'm next to you on the train, chatting with you over a cup of coffee. So, if you enjoyed this conversation and you want more of that, this is the book for you. This one here is my latest one, which is the Struggle book. And this one has been described as a kettle book. So, the kind of book that you can have by the kettle when you're making a cup of tea, pick it up and be able to read something for like 2 minutes. And it's a bit of encouragement, a little bit of, an insight or a mindset thing, just something to kind of change how you think or how you feel. So, if it's shitty moments that you're in that you want a kettle book for, it's this one. And if it's more a commuter's book to as a companion on the journey, it's that one. Is the book available in audio? It is. The Struggle one is. This one's not on audio, but Struggle is on audio.
I've shared links to both those books in the chat, but I will again be sharing links to those in the emails they send out to students. So don't worry if you are interested in the book. We've actually got them both available at 15% discount at the moment. So I'll be sending all the information out in our follow-up email, which will probably come out in about 2 or 3 days. Keep an eye out for that.
And feel free to keep in touch. So, come find me on social media, tell me how you're getting on, or come find me on the website. So I'm just gracemarshall.com. But yeah, good luck, have fun. And
thank you very much for taking part and sharing so many interesting experiences, attendees and Grace, because it's been really great to have both sides and everyone joining in. So thank you. Great. Right. I will end the webinar now. So we will disappear. So I'll just say bye before we go.